It was Saturday, the 24th of August, 1867, in Alton, Hampshire, England. The sun hung heavy over the market town, and the air was thick with the scent of hops from the surrounding fields. Along Tanhouse Lane, near the parish church of St. Lawrence, a woman named Harriet Adams stood at her door, watching three small figures turn the corner toward Flood Meadow. Her eldest daughter, Fanny, walked between her younger sister Lizzie and their friend Minnie Warner. The girl was 8 years old, fair-haired, and known throughout the neighbourhood for her bright manner and uncommon sense. It was a day much like any other. George Adams, the father, had gone to play cricket. The breweries sent their carts along the narrow streets, and the smell of yeast drifted from the public houses that had multiplied since Parliament passed the Beer House Act some 37 years before. Hops were grown on every farm within 5 miles of the town, and the men worked the fields in waistcoat and shirt sleeves beneath the August heat. Harriet Adams watched until her daughters were out of sight, then went inside. There was washing to be done and bread to be set, and the routine of Saturday to be observed. She expected the girls home by dusk. Fanny was a sensible child, always looking after her younger sister, always home when she was told. By 7 that evening, the sun had begun to sink behind the rooftops, and the shadows grew long across Tanhouse Lane. Fanny had not returned. It was not like her. It was not like her at all. Within the hour, men with lanterns would walk through the hop fields, calling her name into the gathering dark. None would hear an answer. The day had begun as all Saturdays did in the Adams household. George Adams rose early and took his breakfast of bread and tea. Harriet woke the children, and Fanny helped her younger sister dress. The family attended to the morning's necessities, and then the father departed for the cricket grounds at Butts Green. The match was to begin at 2 in the afternoon. He expected to return by evening. Fanny asked her mother if she might take Lizzie to Flood Meadow. It was a place the children knew well, a stretch of common land no more than a quarter-mile from Tanhouse Lane, where the grass grew long and the river-way ran shallow over stones. Her mother gave permission. Minnie Warner, who lived nearby, was to accompany them. The 3 girls wore their summer dresses and walked barefoot, as was common for children of their station. They departed at 1:30. Harriet Adams stood in the doorway and watched them go, her hand raised in farewell. The street was quiet. A carter passed, his wagon loaded with barrels bound for the brewery. The bells of St. Lawrence chimed the quarter hour. Mrs. Adams returned to her work. She had no reason to think anything was amiss. At some point between 2 and 3 that afternoon, the girls reached Flood Meadow. Other children were there, playing in the long grass. The day was warm and the sky was cloudless. It was said that a man approached them as they walked. He was well dressed, wearing a dark coat despite the heat, light-coloured trousers, and a tall hat of the sort worn by clerks and tradesmen. He gave them money. First he gave Minnie and Lizzie 3 halfpence, then he gave Fanny a single halfpenny. The coins were warm from his pocket. The man watched them for a time as they played. Then he spoke to Fanny. He asked if she would walk with him to the village of Shalden, along the path that ran through the hop fields. The girl said that she would not. What happened next was reported later by the younger children. The man did not ask again. He simply picked Fanny up and carried her into the hop field, past the rows of tall poles where the vines grew thick and the shadows were deep. The 2 smaller girls stood watching until the man and their companion were out of sight. Then they resumed their play. The afternoon passed. Minnie Warner and Lizzie Adams remained in Flood Meadow with the other children. They picked wildflowers and ran through the grass. The sun moved slowly across the sky. At some point they walked toward home. It was said that they stopped first at Minnie's house and told her mother what had happened. Mrs. Warner, occupied with her own concerns, did not think the matter urgent. She told the girls to go back outside and play. They did as they were told. By 5 in the afternoon, the girls made their way along Tanhouse Lane. They were stopped by a neighbour, Mrs. Gardner, who asked where Fanny was. It was then that Minnie and Lizzie repeated their story. A man in a tall hat had given them money. He had carried Fanny into the hop field. They had not seen her since. Mrs. Gardner, alarmed, went immediately to the Adams house and informed Harriet of what the children had said. The two women set out at once toward the hop field. They had not gone far when they encountered a man walking in their direction. He was well dressed, wearing a dark coat, light trousers, and a tall hat. Mrs. Gardner stopped him. She asked if he had seen a young girl, fair-haired, 8 years of age. The man said his name was Frederick Baker. He worked as a solicitor's clerk for Mr. William Clements, a gentleman of some standing in the town. He told them that he had given 3 girls some money earlier in the day, but he had last seen them playing together in Flood Meadow. He seemed calm. He answered their questions without hesitation. Mrs. Gardner and Mrs. Adams looked at one another. The man held a respectable position. He was employed by a well-known firm. They thought it unlikely that such a person would do harm to a child. They thanked him and went on their way. By 6 in the evening they had searched the meadows and found no sign of Fanny. They returned to Tanhouse Lane, believing the girl would come home on her own, but she did not. By 7 the sun was low. Neighbours began to gather. Mrs. Adams walked back toward Flood Meadow, calling her daughter's name. Others joined her. The search widened. Men walked through the hop fields with the last of the daylight, peering between the rows of tall poles. It was quiet. No children played. At 7:30, a farm labourer named Thomas Gates entered the hop field. He walked slowly between the rows, looking left and right. The light was failing. At the far end of the field, he saw something placed atop 2 poles. It appeared strange, unnatural. He approached cautiously. When he was close enough to see clearly, he stopped. It was a child's head. The rest of the body had been dismembered and scattered across the ground. Parts lay among the hop vines. Other parts were set upon poles or left in the furrows. Word was sent to Mrs. Adams. A neighbour broke the news as gently as circumstances allowed, though there was no gentle way to speak such things. Harriet Adams collapsed. She said she must tell her husband. Accompanied by another woman, she set out for the cricket grounds at Butts Green, but she fell before she arrived, overcome with grief. When George Adams learned what had been found in the hop field, he returned to Tanhouse Lane, took his shotgun from the house, and went into the street with the intention of finding the man responsible. His neighbours stopped him. They told him to let the police do their work. He yielded, though it was said he did so reluctantly. Police Superintendent William Cheney was informed of the crime and arrived at the scene within the hour. The child's remains had been gathered and taken to a public house called the Leather Bottle in Amory Street, where they were laid upon a table. Superintendent Cheney examined what had been found. A search was organized to recover the missing parts. Lanterns were lit, and men walked through the fields in the growing darkness, looking for what they hoped not to find. The superintendent was told that a man named Frederick Baker had given the girls money and been seen near the hop field that afternoon. He was informed that Mr. Baker worked as a clerk for Mr. William Clements, whose offices were on High Street. Accompanied by one of his constables, Superintendent Cheney went to the premises. It was now past 9 in the evening. To his surprise, he found Frederick Baker still at his desk, working by lamplight. The man looked up when the police entered. He seemed calm. He did not ask why they had come. Superintendent Cheney informed him that he was needed at the station for questioning. By the time Frederick Baker arrived at the police station, a crowd had gathered in the street outside Mr. Clements's offices. Word of the crime had spread through the town, and there were those who wished to dispense their own justice. The police took Mr. Baker out through a rear entrance and into custody before the crowd realized he had gone. When he was searched, 2 small knives were found in his pockets. There were spots of blood on the sleeve of his shirt. His trousers were damp, as though they had been washed while he wore them, possibly to remove stains. Mr. Baker denied any involvement in the crime. He said he had given the children money and gone on his way. He seemed unconcerned by the evidence against him. The superintendent spoke to Mr. Baker's colleagues at the solicitor's office. They confirmed that he had left at approximately 1 in the afternoon and returned at 3:30. He had stayed for 2 hours, then departed again. This timing coincided with the period during which Mrs. Adams and Mrs. Gardner had encountered a man near the hop field. An inquest was convened at the Duke's Head Inn on Tuesday, the 29th of August. Evidence was presented and witness statements were taken. Mr. Baker continued to assert his innocence. Nevertheless, he was remanded to Winchester Prison to await trial. The investigation continued. In October, nearly 2 months after the crime, a boy named Alfred Vince came forward. He was 12 years of age and said that on the afternoon of the 24th of August, he had been in the hop field at approximately 2 in the afternoon. He claimed to have seen a man covered in blood washing himself at the river. The man had placed 2 objects in his pockets. One was a small knife. The boy could not identify the other. When asked why he had not come forward sooner, he said he had told his mother. The police searched the area for 16 days, but were unable to find the second object. Forensic examination of the knife found in Mr. Baker's possession concluded that the blood upon it was human. Further testing of his clothing revealed traces of diluted blood on his waistcoat, trousers, socks, and shirt cuffs. The items were sealed and entered into evidence. While in Winchester Prison, Frederick Baker was reported to be a model prisoner. The trial opened at Winchester Crown Court on Thursday, the 5th of December, 1867. The courtroom was filled. The public gallery was crowded with those who had travelled from Alton and the surrounding towns to witness the proceedings. The Honourable Mr. Justice Mellor presided. The prosecution was led by Mr. Barber, who laid out the case against the accused with methodical precision. The first witness called was Minnie Warner. She told the court how the defendant had given her, Lizzie, and Fanny money on the afternoon of the 24th of August. She said he had picked blackberries and watched them play before carrying Fanny into the hop field. Harriet Adams testified next. She recounted her conversation with Mr. Baker near the gate of the hop field and how he had told her he had given the girls coins and gone on his way. Mrs. Gardner gave similar testimony. She identified Frederick Baker as the man she had spoken to that evening. Mr. Morris Biddle, a colleague of the accused, told the court that on the day of the murder he had shared a drink with Frederick Baker at the Swan Inn. During their conversation, Mr. Baker had remarked that he thought he could work as a butcher. The statement was noted by the court. The defence, led by Mr. Carter, argued that Frederick Baker was insane. They presented evidence of a family history of mental instability. It was said that his father had been a violent man, that a cousin had been committed to an asylum, and that one of his sisters had died of brain fever. Mr. Baker himself had once attempted to take his own life after a failed romantic attachment. His father and sister both testified that they had always considered him to be of unsound mind. 2 acquaintances, Alfred Johnson and John Davis, confirmed this assessment. Dr. Curtis of Alton stated that some of the defendant's actions could be attributed to mental disturbance. Dr. Taylor, who had attended Mr. Baker for 25 years, testified that the accused had always possessed a delicate mind. The judge summed up the evidence. The jury retired to deliberate. They returned after 15 minutes. The foreman stood and pronounced the verdict, guilty of willful murder. The judge donned the black cap and sentenced Frederick Baker to death by hanging. The prisoner showed no visible reaction. The courtroom was cleared. The sentence was reported in newspapers throughout the county. The Hampshire Chronicle published a full account of the trial. The Times of London noted the case briefly. Public opinion held that justice had been served, though some expressed unease at the speed of the verdict. The defence had argued insanity, yet the jury had deliberated for only 15 minutes. There was talk in certain circles about the adequacy of the law as it pertained to questions of mental soundness, but such discussions remained academic and did not alter the course of events. While awaiting execution, Frederick Baker wrote a letter to Mr. and Mrs. Adams. In it, he expressed sorrow for what he had done and asked for their forgiveness. Whether they received the letter, or what they thought of it if they did, was not recorded. The family withdrew from public attention. They did not attend the execution. On Tuesday, the 24th of December, 1867, 4 months to the day after the murder, Frederick Baker was hanged outside Winchester Gaol. The execution was conducted by William Calcraft, who had served as the public hangman for many years. A crowd of approximately 5,000 people gathered to witness the event. They stood in silence as the condemned man was led to the scaffold. The prison chaplain walked beside him. The noose was placed. The trap was released. Death was said to be instantaneous. Within 2 years, the name of Fanny Adams had entered common usage in the Royal Navy. Sailors, upon being served tinned mutton as part of their rations, remarked that the contents resembled the butchered remains of sweet Fanny Adams. The expression spread. By the early 20th century, Sweet Fanny Adams, or Sweet F.A., had become a colloquial phrase meaning nothing at all. Few who used it knew its origin. Fewer still remembered the girl from Alton. The hop fields where Fanny Adams died were eventually built over. Tanhouse Lane remains, though the houses have been replaced. The leather bottle where her remains were brought stood until the middle of the 20th century before it was demolished. The Duke's Head Inn, where the inquest was held, no longer serves as a public house. Winchester Gaol, where Frederick Baker was executed, was closed in the 1960s and later converted into residential flats. The parish church of St. Lawrence still stands, and in the churchyard there is a gravestone marking the place where an 8-year-old girl was buried in the summer of 1867. The file on the case remains in the archives at Winchester. It is bound in leather, yellowed with age, and stamped with the year. Few request to see it. The details are a matter of record, preserved but seldom examined. Beyond that, only silence.